Right. Is it all right? Shall we go ahead now?
Yes, sir. Please,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And respected Principal, Dr. Arivalagan, Dr. Jnana Lakshmi, Head of the Department of English, Mr. Bennett, my co-presenter, respected Anuja Chandramoli, Dr. Radhika, Dr. Rajkumaran, my dear teachers, Professor Tandikachalam, and scholars and friends, colleagues from different parts of the globe. Delighted to be associated with you all this beautiful morning. Greetings from my side, from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Okay, it being an online session, I don't know whether things are clear on the other side or not. Whether whatever I'm sharing with you, whether you're following me or any technical glitch, I have no idea. So I request the organizers, please take a note of it. And if things are not okay from my side, please let me know so that I could attend to it if I were to do something from my side. So with this information, I think I can start this session. Towards integrating literature with language teaching, I'll start with the structure of my presentation, how I'm going to deal with this. What are the things I'm going to have here, so that we can initiate a meaningful discussion here. Let me talk about the structure of presentation, and then I'll get into the key points. First, I'll start asking some fundamental questions. This question is going to set the tone for our presentation. Then I'll talk to you about the contextual realities, the realities wherein we are actually placed. I'll talk about the need for integrating literature with language teaching, particularly in the context of, training our students in terms of cross-cultural communication skills, multicultural skills. Then I'll talk to you about treating literature as a wonderful source material and how can we integrate? What are the techniques involved in integration? And the most important thing in my presentation going to be the difference between skill-based approach and comprehensive input hypothesis approach. That's going to be the most important thing in my presentation. Also, I'll be talking to you about reading hypothesis, methods of integration, techniques of integration, and then I'll be arguing teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. So that's going to be the end point of discussion. And then I'll leave you with some note and then open this forum for discussion. So that's going to be the structure of my presentation. Let me start with asking some fundamental questions. What's the relevance of teaching literature in 21st century? Why do we need to talk about it? Is it relevant today? As you all know, we are living in extremely difficult period. Polarization. Lots and lots of misunderstanding between communities. Lots of misunderstanding between societies. Tension, fear, frustration. So we are asking this question, the relevance of literature in the context of the changing realities that we are encountering today. I like to make one statement. I think it might cause some discomfort to some of us here. The question or the statement I'm going to make here is this: technological and commercial meritocracy has given a serious blow to humanistic education. I'll keep getting back to this discussion again and again. This is a disturbing statement. This is the reason why I thought we should focus on integrating language teaching with the literature. In the name of science, in the name of meritocracy, in the name of professionalism, we have done great damage to our society. Our students are educated, but differently educated, expensively educated. There are certain things required. For example, understanding multicultural values, tolerance, civilizational values in terms of, being comfortable with the world of differences. These are the things apparently missing today. So we are asking this question, the question of actually relevance of literature, teaching literature in 21st century, precisely in the context of the changing scenario. Humanistic education completely defeated now. Professionalism has been actually brought to the central stage. So what we mean by professionalism, why have you lost this humanistic education? Why should we talk about it? That's a question we need to ask ourselves here. I argue that we need to restore humanistic education in order to restore the values of democracy, without which I think pluralism, democratic values, understanding the world of differences, not going to be possible. So the context wherein we are placed, extremely difficult, challenging. So we need to argue for integrating literature with language teaching, so that we'll be able to establish the values, restore the values of democracy here. What it means to be being alive, what it means to be being awake. Being alive, being awake is to be responsible. We got to see the things happening, we got to react to it. We got to react to it positively, do something about it. The most frightening expression today is apathy, indifference. So we are focusing on integration in this particular context. Then the second issue is most of the people engage in the task of language teaching. They got their specializations in that particular area. They tend to presume that language teaching and literature teaching both are different. Both are mutually indifferent. As you all know, in language teaching, the focus is going to be on teaching skills, training. It's just teaching them certain basic skills like vocabulary, grammatical structures, and so on and so forth. Literature teaching, that's going to be a different platform. So people are thinking literature teaching, language teaching, both are mutually exclusive. I agree with them. They are mutually exclusive. But is it possible to integrate? Why do we say they are mutually exclusive? The reason is that the end of teaching literature, the end of teaching language, both are different. If you ask our teachers, they say the end of teaching literature is going to be creating consciousness, human consciousness, what it means to be alive, what it means to be responsible, what it means to be being a member of this community, human community. So literature teaching, well, values of democracy, values of civilization, those things going to be focused over there. Whereas in language teaching going to be mere training. Hence, we got different ends. That's why these two fields are different. Is it possible to integrate? We will debate it. I think it is possible. How can we make it possible? We will discuss that. A missing link in our literacy. I think unless until we focus on this missing link, our education not going to be complete. I'd like to give you a clue. I'm going to argue the missing link in our education is reading. Reading and reading. That's going to be the focus. Now, let's talk about these contextual realities. I'm getting back to the same discussion. Humanistic education in intensive care unit. We tend to think it's a waste of time talking about values and all. We don't need to promote these values. The values that we talk about are only the skills. Trying the students so that they'll be able to get a job. Our focus is actually employability skills. Our focus is only getting a job. It's not bringing meaning to our life. It's not bringing meaning to our existence. It's not contributing to society. So that's the first, a dangerous scenario. That's the first thing that we need to address. If you look at 21st century education, connecting 21st century education challenges to humanistic education. I want you to actually step back and think of 20th century challenges. My dear friends, 20th century remarkably creative but dangerously destructive. All major inventions and discoveries possible in 20th century. Man started traveling from bicycle to cyberspace, but without bypassing nuclear bomb explosion. All major inventions and discoveries happen in 20th century. We created a manufacturing bonanza, but we seriously threatened and periled this environment. With all these unfinished agenda, when you move over to 21st century presents certain challenges. I like to identify the challenges of 21st century in 4 categories and link up to humanistic education and let you know why integration very much important today. The 4 major challenges: the Rio and Kyoto movement for protecting biodiversity, quest for establishing, global economy based on justice and fairness. Also, we should think in terms of fighting against all sorts of isms which discriminate one human being from another human being on different names, be it in the name of race and caste and religion, ideologies, and so on and so forth. Fight against all sorts of forces such as illiteracy, unemployment, and so on and so forth. So there are 4 major challenges: biodiversity, establishing global economy based on fairness and justice, fighting against all sorts of isms discriminating people on all sorts of things like corruption, unemployment, and all. These are the challenges of 21st century. When we plan our curriculum, we need to incorporate in our curriculum these many challenges. Then, when we link that up to Cisco survey, which was conducted in more than 165 countries, 10,000 professionals actually involved in this survey, workforce requirement survey, they have given a long list of things to be incorporated into our curriculum. They have identified the list of things in 2 categories. The 2 categories are basic skills, that's one category; applied skills, second category. It's a long list. I don't mean to go into that. You all know, starting with problem solving skills, critical thinking, stress management, goal setting, so many other things. But the most important skill they identified over there is multicultural skills. Multiculturalism, that is said to be 21st century skills. Let's try to look at these multicultural skills. What do we mean by that? Does it mean being able to speak in different accent? Does it mean being able to speak in such a way that our language becomes acceptable? Is it about talking and communicating? I say no. It includes that, but that's not the only thing. In multicultural skills, as much as focus that we have on speaking, we have to have equal focus on listening. So the most important thing in multicultural skills today is we must train a student to listen to different viewpoints, listen to the differences, but don't get disturbed. Encourage the world of differences, appreciate the world of differences, understand that the world is going to be like this. So multicultural skills include tolerance, understanding, sympathy, empathy. This is what I call democratization of human minds. How can we democratize human mind? Getting us is influenced by sympathy, compassion, pity for others. So these are all the multicultural skills that we need to incorporate. But the most important thing here is being able to understand the difference between truth and perspectives. We tend to think that we hold absolute truth. The moment you believe that you hold absolute truth, you tend to believe that all other people who are on the other side, they don't hold the truth just as you claim that you hold. You have absolute truth, absolutism. I believe this absolutism is a danger to society. No one has absolute truth. We all have got perspectives and perspectives and perspectives of truth. Non-absolutism, anti-fundamentalism, anti-foundation theories. Where can we get all these skills? Where can we get all these shifts in perspectives? We can get it only through reading of literature. So if we could integrate literature in our language teaching, we will train our students in this way that there are different ways of looking at the world of realities. There are different ways of understanding the manifestations of truth. Everyone has a perspective. The perspective equally valid. I can't simply say just because I'm coming from a particular background, I hold absolute truth. It's dangerous. And it would make me think that I can live for the truth and I can die for the truth. So once I think that I'll die for the truth and live for the truth, in the same argument, if I extend this argument, I'll kill for the sake of truth, which is dangerous. So literature alone gives us this perspective that we all have got multiple truths, multiple perspectives on truth. This is the one thing that we need to incorporate in our curriculum. I may not agree with you, but I respect your, I respect your right to disagree with me. Voltaire says, I may die defending your right to disagree with me. So this kind of perspective, tolerance, multiplicity of opinions to be tolerated. Reality, it's a construction. Reality never fixed. There are multiple ways of looking at reality. I may look at the world in one way, you may look at it in different ways. So all these realities are constructions. Hence, we need to help our students understand the multiple ways of reality constructions. Multifaceted realities. I should not think the world is only one. It's not one world. There are multiple worlds. There are certain expressions that you may be using in one context. Those expressions may be having different meanings in different contexts within our own country. Within our own country, think of other countries crossing the borders. My dear students, my dear participants, please understand. If we train our students in these multicultural skills, we are helping them cross the borders. Crossing the borders as forms of life. Being able to understand, how people in different countries and continents and cultures, they live, how they actually manifest realities in their own ways. So reality construction, it's always negotiable, it's multifaceted. Then coming to language, there are multiple representations of it. I have an argument here. Nobody speaks in a language, but everybody has it. We all speak a language, but we all have a language. But when you try to speak, it's actually a dialect. The debate, language and dialect, it is a hot topic in social linguistics. There are cultures and societies which they believe that what they have is language, standard language. They try to underestimate other representations. So what we try to understand here is that we all have a language. Language is an abstract thing that I have in my heart, in my mind. But when I try to use it, it's the dialect which is a manifestation. So all these dialects are welcome. All these dialects are multiple representations. We need to teach this. Where from can we get this? We can get it only through literature. So, my dear friends, multicultural skills, it's not one thing. It's not being able to communicate. It's being able to tolerate the differences. Being able to understand multiple presentations of truth. Being able to understand multiple representations of reality. Being able to understand multiple representations of language. Let's not laugh at someone's accent. Let's not laugh at someone's intonation, because Language is a reflection of his identity. It reflects his education, his culture, his ethnicity, his value system. It reflects his mind. So we all are different. Let's not laugh at someone. Let's not form an opinion based on that. Let's try to go beyond the constructs of language to understand what he means to communicate, what he attempts to communicate. I think if we could incorporate these things, then we'll be making attempts towards democratizing human minds. Values such as sympathy, empathy, compassion, respect, creating culture for caring, all these things going to be incorporated. This is what I mean by multicultural skills. Literature is a source material. You cannot have this perspective anywhere except in literature. I strongly believe, I don't mind if you disagree with me, if you think that you could be a better language teacher ignoring literature, you are standing on weak foundation. You can't become a better language teacher ignoring literature. Literature offers you scope. It gives you perspectives. Literature gives you how language can be used. Literature is a resource material for language. It's a beautiful manifestation of language. We find magic of language in literature. Hence, let's introduce literature as source material before students rather than actually introducing certain materials which have got no value at all. Why do I say literature as source material? Because different representative texts, they help us understand the culture dialogue in multiple ways. They help us understand discourse practices in multiple ways, dialogical properties in multiple ways. Conversation analysis can be done in multiple ways. If you treat literature as source material, you will be able to engage in language practice activities in these many different levels. We are offering course here in our university by name Culture Dialogue. Representative text from different sources, different literatures will be introduced. They'll get to understand how Afro-Americans write, how Africans write, how Americans write. The textual differences existing between Morrison's writing, Bickerstau's writing, existing between English T.S. Eliot's writings. So you will be able to understand the sample write-ups. These sample write-ups are culture representations. You can have discourse practices using literature texts, cross-cultural communications. We used to teach here Mahfouz Hassan, Egyptian novelist, Nobel laureate. His wonderful novels, literatures being taught here in our universities. Where do we use them? To get to understand cross-cultural exchanges, how different people communicate, the styles of communication in different levels, like phonological, morphological, syntactic, semantic levels. Cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural exchanges. There should have been a seminar on teaching literatures in English for cross-cultural communication, wherein you will be able to understand, how different ways in which language could be manifested. We can talk about ethnic varieties of English. We can talk about, Afro-American English, American English, Standard American English. We can also talk about Indian English, Chickenovian variety of English, Jewish English, so Spanish English. So different types of Englishes. This is what is called pluralism, representations, multiple varieties. So discourse practices, how in Afro-American text, you will find this example. Toni Morrison's writing can be quoted as best resource because I've done my research and that's how I can quote from there. I can find cross-cultural exchanges in the writings of Toni Morrison. You will find such instances in the communication patterns among different characters. For example, Pecolo's language. It is different from Breedlove's language. Why the difference? That reflects their background. So you will be able to teach these cross-cultural exchanges using these literature sources. Also, we can look at it from linguistic, meta-linguistic, paralinguistic perspectives, dialogical properties, conversation analysis, Grice maxims analysis. So literature can be used as source materials. We can exploit the text, and we'll be able to achieve the end of language teaching for these many different purposes. Now, this is the most important point in the presentation. How can we do that? My dear friends, here I like to talk to you about the difference between skill building hypothesis and comprehensible input hypothesis. Until 1960s, skill building hypothesis was very famous. We used to think in terms of building language skills, like focus on structures, focus on teaching grammar, focus on teaching vocabulary, give them training, and give them training. Don't talk about content.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, could you please change the slides?
Sorry?
Could you please change the slides, sir, in the PPT?
Is it okay now? Is it okay?
No, sir. The PPT is visible. No issues with that. But could you please change the slides?
Sorry?
Could you please change the slides?
Sir, you are not
visible or not?
It's visible.
You're visible. It's fine, sir. Nothing wrong with it. You are visible. Your PPT is also visible. But could you please change the slides in the PPT?
Yeah, fine,
yeah,
sir.
It's fine, sir. It's fine. Now it's fine.
Now let me know. Is it okay now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Sorry. Sorry for
to
this
interrupt you,
inconvenience.
sir. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you so much.
Okay. How can we integrate is the question. Until 1960s, the focus was on teaching vocabulary, teaching grammatical structures, skill building. That was the focus. It was not an information, skill building. Because informative approach to language teaching, that was actually before skill building hypothesis. But you know what happened later? Stephen Krayson, after 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, Stephen Krayson, when he came in, he started challenging the skill building hypothesis, and he started advocating comprehensible input hypothesis. Let me share with you some background information about comprehensible input hypothesis so that we can understand how this integration be done. In skill building hypothesis, teaching a grammar, okay, you teach grammar, give them rules and regulations and all, then once the rules regulations given, the rules regulations would be internalized. Then they'll be able to unconsciously apply the rules and regulations of the language, the conventions of the language, they'll be able to produce. So the skill building hypothesis, the process would be give them structures, give them lots of examples, engage, get connected, engage them. And once we engage, then they'll get the rules internalized. Once internalized, then they'll be able to communicate. So this is how skill building hypothesis went on. So many people supported this skill building hypothesis. But Stephen Krayson, he has come out with a different understanding of this skill building hypothesis. My dear friends, there are lots of theories constructed based on skill building hypothesis. The most important theory is audio-lingual method. You can have this repetitive practice, repeat number of times. Stephen Krayson says, audio-lingual method, in his opinion, is, that is the stupidest method. That is the thing, all things which could go wrong in a teaching plan would be there in audio-lingual method. All the things are wrong, according to Stephen Krayson. In my opinion, too, Stephen's argument is absolutely valid. Let me tell you. Stephen says, how we acquire a language? He says like this. Remember this, the secret of language acquisition is very simple. Number one, we acquire a language only when we understand it. Remember the word. We acquire it only when we understand it. Then the question is, what is this understanding? Understanding is you must know what the person is actually saying. For example, if I say, Ana Mas'ool, Kaif Halik, Ahlan wa sahlan. You have no idea. I make you repeat. I Baman Muhammad Sandosa. You have no idea. Sapare Ode. You have no idea. I've used expressions in 3 different languages. First in Arabic, the second one Sinhala, the third one German. You have no idea what I was saying because the sounds are not familiar to you. But if I make sense through the sound, for example, if I say, Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, Ahlan wa sahlan. So when I say Ahlan wa sahlan, suggesting the meaning of it, then you get to understand the meaning of which is welcome. So the expression will go into your mind. So according to Stephen Krayson, you will get to understand, you get to acquire a language, not learning, just acquiring. You will get to acquire a language only when you understand the input. Number one. So we acquire it only when we understand it. That's number one. Number two, once we understand a language, once we understand the input, then learning of a language or acquiring of a language is automatic. You don't need to make any special effort. It's automatic. It's involuntary. It happens with your hands down, without your knowledge, without your participation. So remember this. We acquire a language only when we understand it. Once we understand it, then learning becomes, or acquisition becomes automatic. Number two. Number three, for which we need to get a kind of input. The input should be comprehensible, understandable. So you will understand it only when the input's comprehensible or understandable. Now the question is, how can we actually present this comprehensible input? For which Stephen Krayson says, the input that you are going to present should be interesting, optimum, and compelling. The input that we are going to give should be interesting. It should be very, very interesting. It should be very, 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 very interesting, and it should be optimum. It is to be to that extent that people could understand, and it should be compelling in the sense that you forget that you are learning. Compelling implies you forget that you are learning. You don't know what's happening. It happens in subliminal level and unconscious level. So according to Stephen Krayson, the secret of acquiring a language is this. Very simple secret is we acquire a language only when we understand it. Once we understand it, then acquiring language becomes automatic. Then for which the input should be interesting, optimum, and compelling. Then Stephen Krayson says the best input would be storytelling. Introduce reading materials. Introduce reading. Now today, depth of reading, students don't read at all. We people think that reading contributes to writing, only listening contributes to speaking. But I say it is wrong. Reading contributes to speaking too. Reading contributes to thinking. Remember, reading is not comprehension. Reading is a kind of activity. It includes several things. Reading is a process of construction. It's a process of engagement. It's a process of image building. It's a process of, manufacturing information in your mind. It's an internal process. So input should be interesting, optimum, and compelling. Stephen Krayson advocates use of literature, using materials such as stories, beautiful stories, story narration, story reading sessions. These things would really help the students acquire this comprehensible input. That's why he advocates this hypothesis, comprehensible input hypothesis. Now, this is otherwise called reading hypothesis. Now let's talk about reading hypothesis. My dear student, my dear friends, he says stories, particularly fiction and comics, they are wonderful resources. Do you know why we call them wonderful? One more important thing I forgot to mention here. Stephen Grayson, here disapproves Lenneberg's idea of critical period hypothesis. Critical period hypothesis advocates that there is a period in our life wherein language learning, that is most that would take place the fastest pace. The critical period hypothesis before puberty. Our mind, it has got that the plasticity, the elasticity, the flexibility to observe. This is Lenneberg's understanding of reading, or Lenneberg's understanding of language acquisition. Stephen Grayson says, well, it has got nothing to do with language learning. Age no bar. It is not age, it's attention. It's input. It's not age, it's attention. It's focus, it's concentration, it's engagement, it's passion. It's not age. It's not hemispheric functions, the right and left hemisphere. No, not at all. He disapproves Lenneberg's point of view. Even Lenneberg's honorably defeated in this particular argument. Stephen Grayson extends this. He says, input hypothesis can be equated with reading hypothesis. My dear friends, reading is the key. Reading is the solution. Reading is the missing link. Read, and read. Stories, fiction, and comics. We have lost our touch with these things. What kind of reading is it? He says, obsessive reading. What is this obsessive reading? The kind of reading that we did last night. Last night, my God, too much to such an extent that we forgot that we got to turn off our lights and we got to sleep until 2, until 3. Sometimes we would read. Haven't you got that experience? You must have got that experience, certainly. Tell me what happened to you when you were reading in that way. When you were reading in that way, you forgot yourself. It's a kind of feeling that you didn't know what happened to you. This is called obsessive reading, a kind of madness. This reading going to do remarkable service here. This reading going to help us in terms of acquiring language. According to Stephen Grayson, this is true. Obsessive reading, the kind of reading, it's not teacher guided reading. It's not reading for marks. It's not reading for comprehension. Remember, no, not at all. It's not that we have to do this reading based on that reading, understanding constructed, based on that understanding, some kind of exercise done, based on the exercises, evaluation done. No, not at all. Just read for the sake of reading. Enjoy reading. This is called obsessive reading, passionate reading. Forget yourself. So when you do that kind of obsessive reading, unconsciously you develop vocabulary, language structures, arguments, thinking, creativity. You create your own world. You create your own world. You understand the world of differences. You enter into a different world. You cross the borders. You cross the borders as forms of life. That's a beautiful benefit. That's a wonderful feeling that you get thanks to this obsessive reading. Free voluntary reading. Let them take a book of their choice, anything, their choice. Let them do that reading on their own. It's free reading, volunteer reading. The advantage here is that if I don't feel like reading, I throw the book and choose another book. I read 3 chapters. If I don't like, I just throw it. Why should I read something if I'm not comfortable reading that? If I'm not happy about it? But certainly there will be a book I'll be interested to read. I'll choose the book and start reading. So what matters is reading matters. It's not what I should read. It's not what I should read. It's reading that matters. Reading actually would introduce me to a different world of understanding. It's a different world of diversity. It's a kind of transportation feeling. It's a greater feeling. I become mature in my understanding of the global realities. So free voluntary reading, don't impose your reading habits on anyone. Let them read their own way. Self-selected reading, let them select their own reading. Group shared reading, let them read and let them share their experiences of reading. Silent and sustained reading, it's a continual reading. It's a kind of reading that we do while traveling in train and buses, while waiting for our turn in the counter, near the counter, in the bus station, maybe in the banks. That kind of reading. Here, the most important thing is no testing, no time restrictions. No testing, no time restriction. Don't put your testing standards on them. Don't tell them you read. The moment you say you read, then you are imposing. That imposition counterproductive. They may not be happy listening to you. So no testing, no time restriction. Let them take their own time. You know, what happens is, sometimes when we read, initial pages will be very difficult. It's very difficult. And later, once the book takes us in, we forget ourselves. Then when we come out, we feel like being lost. We are in a different world. That kind of reading going to help us improving our language skills. Do you believe it? This is what really happens. This is an experience. Almost all of us, most of us would agree with me. I think Stephen Creyson is commonsensical in this perspective. How can we integrate it? We can integrate it multiple ways, but these are all the standard ways of integration. Task-based approach. Well, the task should not actually cause discouragement. Let them negotiate the task. Let them choose a novel. Let them choose a short story. Let them choose a poem. Let them choose any kind of reading material. Let them decide the task that they want to do. Let them engage. Let the students engage. They can choose a book and they say that, well, we will study this and we will do a kind of activity based on this. It could be, we will try to identify meta-linguistic factors. There are linguistic factors. We'll try to understand cross-cultural communicative factors. We'll try to understand dialogical property factors. We'll try to understand argument. We'll try to understand mechanics of writing. We'll try to understand paragraph constructions. We'll try to understand vocabulary construction, straight, foreign words. So let them identify the tasks they're comfortable with. We can adopt communicative language teaching as a method of integration. In communicative language teaching, focus is not on language. The focus is on communication. Message important, not medium. Function important, not form, the function. What we do with language is more important than language. The performative function of language is more important. The performative function, the communicative function of language is more important. Communicative language teaching, please understand, mistakes are okay. Mistakes, we make a distinction between error and mistake. Mistake as a result of ignorance. Error as a result of, sometimes it could be as a result of, lack of understanding of the grammatical rules and all. But forget about these distinctions here. Mistakes, errors, forget about these distinctions. These are all normal processes. This is how people communicate. So in communicative language teaching, please be tolerant. Let them commit mistakes. Let them commit errors. Let them mispronounce. Let them engage. So focus should be on what they try to communicate, how they are using the language. Don't think of language. Think of the meaning that they bring, the kind of intelligibility that they bring in. So communicative language teaching, that's yet another way. So I think on each of these topics, we can have a presentation only on task-based approach, only on communication, because these are very big areas. I'm just touching upon it. If you have any questions, if you ask me to talk about any of these things later on, maybe I'll touch upon it at a later point of time. Team teaching. 2-3 teachers can choose one particular piece of literature, and they can do team teaching, so the students will get to understand different perspectives on the same thing. Collaborative learning. 3-4 students, a group of students, they can collaborate with one another. They can engage themselves in learning. Give them a project, and through the project, they'll be learning. So these are all, standard ways of integrating literature with language teaching. There are plenty of things. There are lots of things we can talk about, in these areas. Because of want of time, I got to cut short this and then move ahead with certain other important things. If you have any questions on this, please let me know. I'll be able to clarify your questions. I'll talk on this little more if time permits at a later point of time. Then coming to techniques of integration, discourse practices, we can talk about discourse practices by introducing a technique called gapping. I'll talk about gapping here in this presentation. The second one, group study. It's a silent reading. Then lots of interactive practices through debates, discussions, interviews, storytelling sessions. Also, we can integrate writing sessions, reflective writing, while teaching pieces of literature. And how could you do that? Let them read, let them relate what they are reading to the context where they are placed. Then let them reflect on the reading, let them recreate in their own ways. So these are the different techniques, in the context of integrating language teaching with literature. But here, I like to focus on the first two things, gapping and silent reading. Gapping is this. We can choose a poem or a short story. Then
excuse me. I'm sorry, sorry to interfere. Could you please change the slides? Your slides are not moving.
I'm so sorry, sir. Is it okay now?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, extremely sorry. Is it okay now? Okay, fine then. We go ahead. So gapping. In gapping, what we need to do, choose a poem, a simple poem, a short story, and leave out certain lines or paragraphs from that particular poem or short story. Engage the students in group reading. Let them read. Let them fill in the gaps. Then initiate discussion. Don't evaluate, but engage. This is what we have been doing here in our own classroom context. Taking a poem, leave out last line or leave out the last stanza, or take a short story, leave out certain passages, leave out certain paragraphs, ask them to read, let them read in groups, let them think in groups, and then they come out with the different opinions. They come out with the different ways of filling the gaps. So when they do it and you get to understand how people think, what it is going to do? Well, it's going to help them in terms of interaction skills. They get to understand how different people think in different contexts. They get to understand how they can use language. They get to understand how they can actually use language appropriately, because you have a context there. The context is linguistic context, the context wherein language used, and then you have to fill in that using a kind of language which is appropriate in that particular context. So the skills in identifying an appropriate expression, that skill being tested. Also, it would sharpen their literary sense. It would help them appreciate your work of art. So gapping it's a wonderful technique that you could adopt. Then coming to silent reading, you can choose a short story, a novel, or an essay. Let them read silently. Don't interfere with the reading. Do not ask any questions. No test, no restrictions. The impact of silent reading would be unconscious learning of vocabulary, grammatical constructions, and so many other factors related to language developments. Do you know, silent reading will have subliminal effect. People may be thinking, no, what is the impact of it? I'm not happy because I've given a piece of literature to the students. I don't know whether they read it or not, whether they follow. Don't worry about it. They will do it. If they are interested in it, they will certainly develop that. So create a context wherein we engage our students in this silent reading. There are two different types of reading. One is silent reading. The other one is intelligible reading that we do in readers' theater. There is a concept which has been recently promoted by many linguists, which is called readers' theater. In readers' theater, students have to sit in groups and they got to read a text. They got to read a text aloud. When they read a text aloud, well, you get to understand how they pronounce, the pronunciation, the structuring, the pauses they make, the sense they make, whether the reading is bringing sense to us or not. Is it intelligible or not? Reading is an art of controlling your breath. How do you control your breath? How do you make passes? So these are all the things that will happen in loud reading, intelligible reading, for which we need to have readers' theater. But this is a different kind of reading. It's a silent reading. So silent reading, you can choose any piece of writer, any short story, any short story, novel, or essay. But the but is very important. The piece of literature that you are going to choose should be interesting, very, very, very interesting. It should be very, very, very interesting. It should be optimum input. It should be optimum input. It should be providing them with inputs required for language development. You got to identify such stories. I would strongly advocate, stories of Somerset Maugham. You'll have wonderful conversation exchanges, pithy sayings, beautiful expressions in Somerset Maugham's writings. In Indian context, R.K. Narayan short stories. Use R.K. Narayan short stories because they are related to our context. We can talk of Chandran. Chandran is our next door neighbor. We can talk of the characters. The characters are actually from our own context, our own background, rather than think of a piece of writing by T.S. Eliot or Virginia Woolf. So think of identifying a short story. It could be a comic. It could be anything. It should be interesting. So we can engage ourselves in silent reading. We can engage our students in loud reading, intelligible reading, taking them to theater. So the point here is teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, TPRS. This is one thing which is very famous today in very many foreign universities. There are 4 stages involved in this. Read silently, or you have a reading session, let them listen. So students can engage themselves in reading silently, or the teacher can read, or a group of students can read, and the second group would listen. Then create a context wherein they can narrate the story. Similar stories or different stories, with the help of the cue, they can narrate the stories. In this narration, they can engage in discussion. So reading, listening, narration, and engagement. All these things could be integrated in storytelling sessions. Listening to story is deeply rooted in us as a sense of property. It would certainly promote so much of interest in us. We can bring in, life to the classroom. We can break the burden. We can make our teaching interactive. We can make the learning enjoyable. We can bring in humane face to our teaching. Hence, the way forward is, please make it a point that the students have got access to books, comics, or short stories, novels, readable ones, easy ones. Don't think in terms of actually providing them books which you think very important. No, what they think important, what they think readable, what they think they should read. Talk about it. Talk about books. Introduce books. Every session, introduce it. Hold books in your head. Present the books before them. I'm sorry to say that our students have lost their touch with reading. That's why they have lost the touch with thinking. When there is no reading, there is no thinking. When there is no thinking, there is no integration. I repeat, reading is not comprehension. Reading results in comprehension, but reading creates lots of activities in our mind. We create lots of things in our mind, like we try to construct lots of things. We try to create our own realities. It helps us create imaginative faculty, promote imaginative faculty of thinking. So reading promotes critical faculty of mind. It promotes different worldviews. Hence, see that the books are available to our students. And we need to have instructional practices interactive. We should have instructional practices interactive. Teachers should become co-hosts in the process. Teachers should become not, standing on the platform and teaching always, not like that. We could become friends. We could interact. It's not teaching, it's learning. All of us can sit. All of us can learn. All of us can engage ourselves. It's sharing. It's a sharing of culture. It's a sharing of experiences, not teaching from pulpit. The curriculum should be dynamic. We got to break down this. The kind of monotonous or the rigidity, the academicality. Do away with that. Make the curriculum negotiable. There are things that we can change within our curriculum, like emergent curriculum. Curriculum determined by the administration is one thing. The curriculum that we could actually change. So please make scope within the rigid curriculum. Make scope. Provide scope for some changes within that rigid curriculum. So dynamic curriculum. I think the people engaged in curriculum planning, they should listen to the teachers. The teachers should be given the rights to, engage themselves in the curriculum planning, not administrators sitting in, the comfort of AC rooms and then imagining a context in their own way and then preparing. No, it's not like that. People who are on the ground, they know the ground reality. They are the people who are actually engaged in the process of teaching and, learning activities. So they should be heard. They should be given chance and autonomy to the teachers and the learners, freedom to the teachers, freedom to the learners, and evaluation should be sensible, minimal. Evaluation sometimes causes anxiety. That anxiety causes affective filter, affective filter turned on because of the anxiety. When affective filter turn on, you become too conscious about yourself. When you become too conscious about yourself, you will not be normal in your communication. Continual engagement, read, and read. So if you focus on these, and I'm sure that we will be able to integrate language teaching with literature, we'll be able to bring in meaning to our classroom teaching and classroom learning environment. I wish you all the best. With this, my presentation coming to an end. If you got any questions, anything to clarify, please let me know. Delighted to answer your questions. Thank you very much. My presentation with this coming to an end.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the valuable input you gave us. Now the session is open for questions. Participants, if you have any questions to ask, you can ask now.